Welcome to the Mycelium Network podcast, a podcast for early-stage web developers and the mentors, teachers, and communities that help them along the way. Hey, Schalk. Thanks for joining me today. It's kind of strange because I'm Schalk too. So the two Schalks are chatting. How are you today?
All right. A bit rough, to be honest. So my 10-month-old daughter decided that it's the ideal time to start the teething process in the middle of us moving houses. Apart from me sitting between like boxes and furniture here, I think I have about a half an hour sleep in. Yeah, so, but it comes with the territory.
That's true. I've not had the best sleep in the last while as well, for different reasons. We've had a bit of the COVID, everybody in our house, so we're kind of still recuperating, and it seems like my wife got it for a second turn.
Nice.
So that's fun. But
yeah, I've had it twice as well. So I can sympathize.
Yeah, for sure. It's not something you want. That's for sure. So we know each other from random interactions related to CodeBridge and the ZA Tech Slack and some open source hack days and stuff like that. And I've read up a bit about you, like on your website and stuff on the Open Up page. There's some things on the Open Up page that I found really interesting that I want us to dig in a little bit. But before we do that, if you could just give us like a whirlwind introduction to like your background, how you got to where you are today.
So introduction from my side. I don't know. I think for me, I always start with the. I think it's important in terms of context for me, just in terms of my own journey and so forth, is that I don't have a formal background in tech. I, like many other people my age that are in tech, and specifically at the specific intersections where I am, didn't actually study this. We kind of ended up here by accident. And I think that's also maybe one of the reasons why I kind of also find myself in the spaces that I do, because I think for me, tech and you know, things around the tech industry and so forth have always been things that I've made sense of through conversation instead of actually studying it. So, you know, I think like I've been very a part of communities and meetup and so forth in the early days in terms of just like actually figuring out how to build websites and whatever. And I think once I actually, I guess, hit a point where I could maybe call myself a professional in the space, I think I just didn't stop like joining meetups and stuff, and I just kept on going. And I think I'm still like a part of a lot of those communities today. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're behind what? FedSA, ZA Tech, ZA Product Design, and CodeBridge. That's a lot.
Okay, cool. So I don't know if it's going to make it any better, but at the moment I'm not actively involved in CodeBridge. So at least I have that going for me. So it's down to like 3 at the very least. But yeah, like I'm obviously, you know, I was very involved there for a long time. I kind of ran it as well. Obviously, like know a lot of the people there, but just because, you know, where life takes one and so forth. And, you know, I'm currently quite away in terms of distance from like actual CodeBridge itself, the venue. So, and with the current petrol prices and stuff, it's a bit of a tough one. So I'm not actively involved there at the moment, but yeah, like obviously kind of still pop in every now and then. Yeah.
Would you mind explaining a little bit about what exactly CodeBridge is?
Phew, okay. I think that is something we've been trying to answer for a very long time. So I can speak to obviously like kind of my experience when I was kind of like actively managing it and so forth, but I obviously don't want to speak on behalf of JD and the rest of the team who kind of are running it at the moment. But I think when I was there, it originally started out. So I think between me and JD, we definitely had a very big interest in what you would, I guess, call civic technology. So effectively the intersection between technology and kind of civil engagement and social good and, NPOs and civil society and so forth. Because I think we were quite frustrated in terms of just I think the ventures that we saw where you had civil society or nonprofits or so forth, where they kind of ventured into the world of tech and, tried exploring solutions within the world of tech. I think in terms of just the outcomes that we just saw, we felt was it was very, I think, demoralizing. So I think we wanted to create a space where we could have those discussions in terms of how can you actually leverage technology for social good? Because everyone comes to the discussion in terms of, okay, we're going to use blockchain and AI to solve world hunger. But I think if you've spent any time within the space, you'll just know that is not only pretty much unachievable, but it's also even if you were to solve social problems or have some type of social good without it actually being connected to something happening in the real world, it's pretty much not of value to anyone. I think we had a saying where we used to say that tech, a lot of times tech isn't the solution, but it shouldn't be the problem. And I think that is what we saw a lot of times is people started with the tech. They took tech as a kind of a given, and then they try to work their way backwards and figure out how can they employ this for some type of social good, instead of starting at the actual need and then deciding on the tech that you employ and so forth based on that. So honestly, it's a very hard question to answer because I think it just came from a place of being dissatisfied with kind of how tech was being leveraged in the space of civil society and social good and so forth, and just being tired of seeing nonprofits pay thousands of rands for a basic WordPress website that falls over within a month. So I think it was just a general open space to explore those intersections. But I think at some point, it started growing into developing other facets as well. So, just general mentoring and people just connecting on tech projects and so forth. So I think some of that specific focus, I think, started getting diluted at a later point, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because, at the end of the day, I think the goal was to keep it an inclusive space. So demanding that we kind of all work towards a specific mission that we dictate, was kind of a bit against the founding principles. So yeah, it's to this day still a very hard question to answer.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally get that. I tried to run a similar kind of program called Third World Problems. The idea, and I had the idea initially, was also to employ tech to solve world problems. But I quickly realized, especially as soon as I started doing some research, I realized that, exactly what you said, is you first need to understand the problems, and then you need to decide whether tech is the right thing to solve that problem. And that was actually, as is often the case, the hardest part was clearly identifying a need. That was really, and that is kind of why the project fizzled out. Unfortunately, I'm trying to resurrect it again, but the reason it fizzled out is because people that would be interested in it would be interested in the code, making an app that can do something. And that's great. And you need that enthusiasm and you need those people. But before you do that, you need to understand the concrete problem and what the people on the ground really need. Do they need technology or do they need bread? It's fine to have an app, but if you're hungry, the app's not going to help you unless it's going to help you know how to grow your own food. and how as a community becomes self-sustainable, and the app or the technology helps you achieve that. Great, but the technology is not the key part of that part, and that's why I think that's why that project kind of fizzled out, because again, it's this, what is third world problems? Hard to say. It's about third world problems, but the real third world problems, not the jokingly stuff that people say like, oh, first world problems, not in that joking sense of that, like the true third world problems that people face in the real world. And I think that kind of leads to a quote, I think from you, that is on the Open Up website, where you made 3 points, and they are: attempting to make sense of the bigger South African socioeconomic picture, cultivating daily practices that interrogate my own position in it, and understanding how the latter should stand in relation to the former. I really love that, and I'd like it if you can unpack that a little bit.
Sure, I wrote that a long time ago. Now, so having someone else read it back to me, you're not going to lie, it sounds pretentious, but yeah, let's work with it. So I think it's also just like in terms of just due diligence and so forth. I think it's important for me to just also note that I'm not a full-time employee of Open Up at this point anymore. I do contract work. I mostly do full-time freelance work. But yeah, I think that the time I spent at Open Up was a very formative time in my kind of life. And I think it very much formed a lot of the ideas that I have and how I kind of see myself as someone in the field of tech. Cool. So, sure. In terms of that, yeah, it's like if I were to kind of relate my where I'm today, so I think back when I joined the Open Up team, that was very much something that I spent a lot of time thinking about. I think for me, as mentioned, I don't necessarily have a formal tech background. I would say that I'm self-taught, but with two caveats. The key being that everyone kind of working at this in the web space in 2022 at my age are self-taught, because you couldn't study it. You could maybe study Java, or you could study graphic design, which included something called web design, but that was, you kind of did a website the same way that you did a flyer or a brochure or whatever. So this whole notion of, CSS wasn't really even a thing when I studied. So, but I think over the time, and, so I've been involved, I've increasingly been moving into kind of spaces. I think you reach a point where you almost get tired of building things yourself, and you're more interested in seeing what other people build and what they are doing. So I'm spending more time actually working with others in terms of helping them figure out how to build the things they want to build, and also people that are looking for mentorship or whatever, or who are trying to kind of upskill or kind of learn these skills and so forth. And so as part of that, I was very involved for 1 year, maybe it was kind of just when COVID hit, was it, I think 2020, I was very involved in a project called Codex, which is based in Harrington Street in Cape Town. So it's run by a guy called Andre and Cara, who's the two of them run it. And they're just inspirational people. I think I would highly recommend you just speak to them as well on the podcast. And so the goal there was to take people who didn't necessarily have the same opportunities that I or any of the people at Codex had, but are interested in kind of figuring out if they can create a career in the tech world. So effectively, these would be people from kind of the bottom of the LSM scale. So a lot of these people didn't even have internet at home. And I think there's a really good, an interesting intersection there where, there's a massive demand for tech skills. I think if you even look at just recruiters and even a business model like OfferZen, that wouldn't work in any other industry, just because there's such a big demand. And then, like in South Africa, we have this massive problem of unemployment. So I think a lot of people are asking questions around, can you maybe use tech to, like this massive demand for tech skills, to maybe make a bit of a dent in that massive, I think we're like youth unemployment, I think we're above 50%. So
scary.
Yeah, so I think, I think that, so I joined the Codex team with that in mind, and so we kind of definitely. So I took a group of girls, and we got a lot of funding from the Google Foundation, and kind of I taught them a lot of skills that related to kind of building web apps and stuff, kind of doing a lot of work with web components, doing a lot of work with React. I think a lot of them are employed today as React developers. But I think it was also a very big learning experience for me, because there's a lot of things that I took for granted in terms of, if I say, I'm self-taught, there's a lot of privilege that I had in my life that made that journey very easy for me. Just basic things in terms of having a degree, although it's not a degree in tech, being able to have gone and studied at the university, definitely it teaches you some really great abstract thinking skills. And I often find that with these type of programs, it's very easy to teach someone like HTML, you do this and this is how you make the thing blue. JavaScript, you do this, and when you click the button, this happens. But I think once you get into the kind of the more complex stuff, in terms of things like encapsulation, like APIs and architecture and those type of things, it's like there's a level of abstract thinking that I have had the privilege of being taught in for a very long time in my life, starting, from having the opportunity to go to a pretty decent high school, by general standards. It's not a public school, but in terms of just the general South African socioeconomic circumstances, sure, it's definitely within kind of, when you're talking about the average, I had a phenomenal education. And I think so, that is how, if I were to contextualize the points that you mentioned around what I said when I joined Open Up, is I think that has been kind of where my journey has been going post Open Up. I think at Open Up, I very much looked at it through the lens of how can we use tech to make things better for people that don't necessarily have the same privilege that I have. And I think increasingly now I'm kind of exploring more avenues in terms of how can I maybe use what I've been able to learn over the years and maybe help other people kind of learn those skills, maybe with less of the pain that I had to endure, in terms of just not knowing anything about even agile processes or anything, missing deadlines, having to work through the night because I couldn't estimate properly, or just completely just missing how to even architect projects or whatever. And I think so. Currently, as I'm speaking at this point, I'm kind of at a place called CodeSpace. It was originally created by Emma Dex, which she founded Code for Cape Town, which specifically looked at empowering. So they started out with kind of a program in Khayelitsha, which is one of the informal settlements in Cape Town, and they kind of also specifically with a focus on some of the girls there, kind of teaching them basic tech skills and tech literacies and so forth, and that kind of evolved into teaching them programming and so forth. And now they're actually running a full remote program, which is based on kind of an income share agreement. So anyone can apply. You don't pay anything so it's a 1-year software engineering program that I'm currently running for them. So anyone can apply. And you just you go through an application process, because obviously you want to weed out people that aren't really that interested, but they just don't know what else to do. And effectively, you get an entire year's worth of training in everything from, HTML, CSS to full on JavaScript, like full stack JavaScript from, all the major frameworks to Node, even AWS, cloud functions, all of that stuff. So really almost a kind of a full on JavaScript engineering program with HTML and CSS. And effectively you don't pay. And then if you do get a job after you've studied, then you retroactively pay a portion of kind of what you would have paid as fees as a part of the percentage of your salary. So I think that's a really great model, and it's one of the reasons why I've kind of involved with them. Apart from just really enjoying working with the team, I definitely think, specifically in a time now where there are just around every corner there's a boot camp, trying to cash in on this, everyone wanting to get into development and so forth. So I think having a model like that is really great. And I think it keeps everyone accountable, because at the end of the day, I'm not getting paid if my students aren't placed, because I effectively get paid a percentage of their salary. I think that is kind of, if I were to connect that statement with where I'm currently in my life, I think that is kind of the area that's most applicable.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I know there's a school or a movement in the US that has a similar approach to how you pay. I always blank on their name for some reason, but I'll remember and put a link in the show notes.
Is it the one that specifically works with refugees and so forth?
No, not specifically. No,
because I always blank on that one's name as well. I have an actual I have a friend, Douglas, who's actually doing work for them. But yeah, there's amazing stuff going on. I think back in the days when I was very involved with CodeBridge, we also had a couple of people down from a UK-based I also wouldn't say boot camp, maybe incubator, called Coders and Founders, where they also kind of do the same type of thing, but with the goal of not necessarily. So I think with the code space stuff, we're specifically trying to get people into tech careers, whereas with Coders and Founders, and I think a similar equivalent in South Africa would be Rethink Code, for whom I've also done a bit of work, where they maybe they see the tech skills as a way for you to kind of create your own startup. And so you're not specifically looking to get hired in the tech field. You're actually learning tech skills with the goal of creating your own business. There's a lot of super exciting stuff going on there. And I honestly, I have to kind of exercise a bit of restraint because I just find it so inspiring, so exciting that if I don't I'm just going to get involved in everything and burn myself out. And you probably know also the just the kind of when you have to compare that to actual salaries of working in tech, you also kind of take a bit of a hit, which to me isn't that big of a deal. But now that I have a daughter, it's maybe not that easy anymore for me to just say, nah, it's all right. I can live on passion alone.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, that does change the game. But there's a lot of people who make it work nonetheless. And but I'm exactly in the same boat. I mean, the reason I started the Mycelium Network is not necessarily to benefit me directly. It's literally, I want to share my knowledge and connect people who want to get into code for whatever reason they have with people who can help them. Because again, I was also privileged, of course, in my opportunities. But some of the things I did, I made kind of a bold move. I mean, when I started contracting at Mozilla, I had a full-time, paying job working for a contracting agency, and I was placed at Vodacom, and I was earning a decent salary and getting medical aid and all that stuff. But I wasn't happy doing the work. The work to me was meaningless. So that it was literally, I couldn't care less about what I was building. And I always had this thing with Mozilla and their manifesto and stuff like that, and being involved in open source. Those things connected very well for me. And at some point I decided, you know what, if I don't kind of just take the plunge, I'm probably never going to do it. And I actually resigned before actually having the job at Mozilla. And I had a family at that point. So it was, it was scary. It worked out. So, looking back now, I'm like, wow, I took a massive chance there, but it all worked out in the end. But still, I mean, but I want to create those opportunities for other people, to also take a leap sometimes, a leap of faith, and not be scared to fail, because, the world we live in today, there's so many mantras about failing, but then when it comes to social media, you dare not show your failures until you are very successful, and then you can speak about your failures. But while you're still climbing the ladder and some of the rungs break under you, don't tell anybody about that. Keep it quiet. And I think that we should that shouldn't be normalized. Doesn't matter where you are in your career or your path or whatever you want to call it. It's always okay to fail, and it's always okay to get up and try again. It's also okay to try a thing and find it's not for you and move on to something else. The tech industry isn't for everybody. It's also been sold to people in different ways, and sometimes falsities are being, sold to people. This almost utopia sold, which isn't always the case. It's sometimes, and even sometimes if you do stuff that you're passionate about, sometimes there's just stuff that's just work, and you just kind of have to grind your teeth and just get through it.
No, 100%. Yeah, I have the same thing with the front-end development South Africa stuff at the moment, where so it's a non-profit that I and a very good friend of mine, Justin Slack, kind of founded, specifically for kind of just advocating for front-end development and creating resources and connecting practitioners in South Africa within the world of front-end development. And I almost want to say it's kind of been too successful insofar that now we need to do a lot of stuff that actual real nonprofits need to do, like auditing and actually doing operations, keeping track of where money is going, actually getting funding, bringing contractors on board and so forth. So I always kind of miss the days when it was just me and him, kind of just cowboying it. And that's exactly the same, so obviously the part that doing the finances is definitely, and doing the taxes and whatever and auditing is obviously the part I enjoy the least. But at the end of the day, in terms of just value, that is, I guess, where I can provide the most value. So I think there's also a part of, I think sometimes a lot of, specifically in the open source world, I think a lot of it is sometimes romanticized a bit. And yeah, let me just put it this way, so you spoke about ZA Tech, and I might regret mentioning this, but I guess it's so thematically relevant at the moment. So last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, some of the admins on there actually got a letter, a personally addressed letter from someone's lawyers threatening civil litigation because we banned them from ZA Tech. So so I think that is kind of the type of stuff you sometimes need to deal with, especially within the world of open source as well. A lot of with CodeBridge as well. A lot of the time it's just actually managing humans and personalities that don't get along and whatever. I think there's a inherent messiness to being involved in these type of things. I think the fact that I can't even really say what CodeBridge actually was definitively is there's a messiness to that, And I think specifically us in the tech world who are so used to like clean code and debugging things and efficiency, and like sometimes like that messiness is quite hard for us to stomach, because we want to understand, we want to know what it is, we want answers. And like sometimes that messiness kind of gives us kind of the same feeling that, for example, something like spaghetti code might give us. But in real life, you kind of need that messiness. You can't have like everything just clean and perfectly laid out.
That is very true. I was just having a look here. I'm reading this book about program management of open source projects, and there's this quote that I think is like kind of relevant to what you just said. They say, as a program manager, you coordinate the efforts of the contributor community to meet the project's goals. The title Chief Cat Herding Officer is a joke, but an apt one. You're working with a group of largely of entirely composed of volunteers to produce software that other people will want to use. Individually, contributors have their own interests and goals. When you're a successful program manager, you get these individuals aligned in the same general direction to meet overall goals of the community. That was so well put to me.
Yeah, I'm reading a really great book at the moment. It's been recommended to me quite a bit, and I finally got down to reading it. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's called The Goal.
No, I haven't heard about it.
So it's kind of very widely shared within the Agile community. It's actually a novel, but it's a novel about a kind of a factory manager, and the kind of the factory. Like on the verge of getting shut down, and then like them trying to figure out how to save the factory and so forth. And as part of that, they kind of like obviously, like I don't want to like obviously lay out the entire plot of the book, but like as part of that, they come to some insights around just the nature of projects, and like things like dependencies, and estimations and so forth. So. But I think like the fact that having it packaged as a novel to me like is actually such a great like way of communicating that, because so obviously there's a lot of great books on kind of like these type of things like Lean Startup, all of those books. But I think like now for me, as I'm reading this book and kind of looking at it through the lens of a novel of someone who's, so it's also like kind of his marriage is like falling apart and whatever. And, so like kind of seeing like the processes and, all these things around how do you actually develop in your career? How do you actually manage a team? How do you do all these things? I think sometimes we forget all of that happens as a microcosm in this larger thing that is just our lives in general, and everyone else's lives, so like in that you're dealing with like personal things, and you're having like issues with family, and you're getting burnt out, and like I'm very open about kind of my own struggles. I have a pretty long history with mental illness as well, and so I'm pretty open, and I wish I could talk about that more. But sometimes like when I try to kind of always be open about it, but sometimes I feel that sometimes it like people feel sometimes it's a bit shoehorned into conversations, but and I think I was maybe overcorrecting a bit in terms of like people not talking about it. But that's tough for me. Like, but that's almost like an entire podcast episode on itself.
No, for sure. No, I mean, I have a blog on Medium where I openly write about my struggles with substance abuse because of mental health problems, anxiety, stuff like this. So I very much understand all of this, and the thing that I realized at some point is, why do I want to compartmentalize my life into these buckets? Why do I feel the need to have that writing, as open and honest as it is, be separate from the stuff I write about tech? Like, why am I, it's almost as if I'm saying that it should be normalized and people shouldn't be afraid to talk about these things. But then I compartmentalize and I kind of, like, don't look there. That's personal. It's like, no. And so it's super uncomfortable. But I am making a concerted effort to not do that. Maybe I will have the blog separate on Medium because the audience that will benefit from that is there, so it makes sense. But I won't hide from linking to it or talking about it or mentioning it in a thing, which previously I would probably avoid. Like I for example, would have like a Ko-fi thing, and then I have one that's like for my personal, and then one for my, this is my professional. And I realized that the reason I'm doing that is because of this whole thing that social media is driving you towards. It's saying, no, when you're in the public eye, like whatever that is, 5 people looking at you or 5,000, doesn't matter. Your human nature kicks in the same way. You have to put your best foot forward. And admitting that you have struggles is not that. It's like I just said about the failure thing. You can talk about failure once you've succeeded, but once you haven't succeeded, I'm putting it in quotes, you're not allowed to talk about your failures because then you just look weak. And that's nonsense. I mean, show me a person whose life has gone just peach perfect, like from day one up to the day they are now. We all have struggles. And I think the more we talk about that, the better. And I think people will be more okay with also understanding. I found that personally, if you're open about these things, people are more willing to come meet you in the middle, so to speak. They're more understanding if you're open about it. And of course, you're gonna find people who are not like that. But I think, for the most part, you're going to be surprised by people's reaction when you're actually honest.
Yeah, and I think about that quite a lot. And I sometimes I wonder whether I'd be as open about these things. If once again, I guess, I explicitly on my LinkedIn profile, so I think I have front-end development, product design, teaching, and destigmatizing mental illness. And I sometimes wonder if I would be this open about it if I wasn't, what would be the word? If the tech industry wasn't didn't have as many opportunities. I'm struggling to kind of figure out how to phrase it now. So if it was a bit more of a competitive kind of industry and there was a shortage of work or whatever, specifically within the tech world, anyone, if you are slightly above intermediate level, you are very in demand. So I think sometimes I wonder whether I would have been as open about it if I knew that I was struggling to get work and there was very few positions out there and anything that can be used against you would be used against you. But I don't know, maybe let's see, in 10 years things might change. I might be that was a really big mistake. I shouldn't have been as public about it. But I think for now, I've been managing somewhat well. I've been managing very well, while at the same time being open about kind of all my personal struggles and so forth. And I actually did a very interesting talk. So I was asked by some of the folks at Dariel. So they sometimes have speakers come and chat to the team. And I think they at some point were looking for someone to chat about mental health. And I've been promising myself that I would do an actual real talk on it at some point and not just mention it as an aside. So I kind of just volunteered to do it. And I think specifically, I actually spent a lot of time talking and reflecting on how much I've actually learned about kind of being human just from getting deeper into the world of product design. And I think I really resonate with what you're saying about, failure and so forth. But I think it's it's even more, it's actually not necessarily even failure, but I think it's being able to understand things and like being able to articulate that failure. I think when you're in the and I think within the world of product design as well, there's often a saying that it's not necessarily that you're scared that someone isn't going to be receptive to your idea. You're scared that you're not going to do your idea justice if you share it too early. So if you push that MVP out too early, maybe you're like, okay, cool, we should have actually just done this and it wouldn't have failed. So it's more a thing about missed opportunity or not being able to express the actual value of something early on. And I find it to be the same as well with kind of discussions around failure and just general experience and so forth. And I think it ties into what you said, that if you can reflect back and you can very nicely articulate and make sense of what was going on, and frame it in terms of a bigger journey, that's a lot easier to do than when you're in the thick of it and it's confusing and it's messy and you don't know what's going on. You don't even know if it's a failure, but it's this blob and you don't know how to make sense of it. I think that's when it's hard. And being vulnerable at that moment, I think, is very hard. But I think I've kind of learned a lot from the world of product design, specifically in that regards, because there's a lot of similarities there in terms of actually pushing a product out and not actually even really knowing what it is or what value it provides, and wanting to hold back all the time and be like, okay, let's just refine it a little bit more. It needs a bit more polish. And I think even if you think about things like extreme programming and so forth, so one of the core principles of extreme programming is, which, Agile kind of grew out of the world of extreme programming and so forth, is courage. So I think there's a lot within this field, and I think it's almost like the tech field is almost, I think, pushing humans to I guess the edge of what they're comfortable dealing with complexity-wise. And because of that, it's actually bringing up a lot of stuff in you in terms of uncertainty. And, people talk a lot about imposter syndrome. But specifically, it's a big thing in the tech industry. I think sometimes we don't ask, why is it so big in the tech world? Why isn't many people talk about imposter syndrome amongst plumbers or farmers or, nurses? And I think it's just because, what we are required to do in the world of tech is so kind of straining in terms of emotionally for us and our capabilities. I often joke and I say that, as you get more senior, kind of the imposter syndrome kind of starts going away a bit. And it's not because you get better, but it's you just realize how bad everything else is out there. That you kind of realize, I didn't know much and whatever, but no one else knows anything.
Exactly.
So it's look at kind of that incident with WhatsApp and Facebook with the DNS. I'll always remember the date because it's the date my daughter was born. So everyone was so we couldn't send anyone any WhatsApp messages or anything or any photos or whatever because WhatsApp was down. What a day for WhatsApp to go down. Exactly. So, but I think that just kind of shows you as well, it's I think at some point you just realize just how with prayers and sticky tape and just how kind of just held together ad hoc most of these things are, and how people are just kind of just getting by in terms of what they actually understand and what they can actually do, and how the complexity of the things we're building far exceed actually our abilities to manage it. And I think that kind of makes some of the imposter syndrome kind of fizzle away a bit, where you just realize everyone else really sucks at this as well.
Yeah. No, that's very true. And I think people also oftentimes underestimate how understanding your users can be. If something doesn't quite work, they'll find a way around it, or they'll try again. There's very few instances with your everyday like website or web application where somebody is going to make a huge fuss about the fact that the button didn't quite react in the way it was, or when I resized my browser window, there was this moment where two things were misaligned. Like, we sweat all that small stuff, but in the real world, honestly, like, first of all, you run into it all the time because it's humans making these things and we're all fallible. And the second point, that is not the end of the world. It's like, make your window a little bigger and then it's aligned again if it bothers you.
Yeah.
It's okay.
No, 100%. Both you and I will probably get a lot of hate mail for actually saying this, but I wish it wasn't the case. Honestly, I wish it wasn't the case. I wish like people would be more outraged at bad experiences on the web. Because I think then if it hurts companies, they would actually put more resources into it. And I always tell my students as well, specifically my design students, that I wish it wasn't the case. I wish I could tell you that, you need to treat your users with respect. It's a very brittle relationship. If you break their trust, that's very important. And I believe all those things. So I wish I could say that translates also into actually successful business. But what I've unfortunately learned over the years is that I've just been in part of projects and stuff where things were just broken. And, and somehow so people complained on Twitter and they kind of wrote a lot of angry stuff. And a year later, things were just back to the way they were once those issues were resolved. How many times has Woolworths been boycotted now? How many of those people that boycotted with a company like Woolworths over the years are now back at Woolworths again? I wish it wasn't the case, but at the very least, if anything, it also kind of just eases a bit of the pressure of having to have everything be perfect. I think sometimes in terms of companies, it maybe makes for some gross incentives. But I think as individuals working in this space, it's also not the end of the world if things break.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, I'm not advocating for doing sloppy work. It's
same, yeah.
It's more a case of doing something right takes time. And when business interests clash with time, oftentimes, you literally just don't have the time to do it the way you would like to do it. And so sometimes you need to make trade-offs. And that is where I'm talking about where the forgiving nature of people will come in and kind of save you from those situations. Because I mean, if we all had product managers or product owners who weren't driven by OKRs and deadlines and stuff like that, we would build software that is much more resilient and, is done better. But sometimes time constraints forces you to take shortcuts, unfortunately.
Yeah. And to me, honestly, this is such a hard thing for me. And, I'm kind of even scared to talk about it because, I know how a lot of people are going to react. But, I can just honestly speak about kind of how things look from where I'm standing. And I think I'm someone who's very passionate about accessibility. I've done several talks on accessibility. We actually at Frontend Development every year on Global Accessibility Awareness Day, we do a specific event. This year we had a phenomenal one where Brett, someone I met at DevConf, who's a blind front-end developer, actually did a talk and actually showed how he codes as a blind developer. I'm struggling to find some type of incentive for companies to really care about accessibility apart from just making them feel bad for not doing it. I think a lot of people would argue that there are, financial, you can frame it financially and whatever. But honestly, I think a lot of like business thinking around like business and so forth, the whole 80-20 rule, 20% of your users account for like 80% of your kind of value. Like that flies in the face of catering to a smaller percentage that require more accessibility. And I think there's also like, we sometimes get a bit stuck on, I'm just so scared that I'm just going to say something that I'm going to regret. Not necessarily that I'm withholding anything, but accessibility is such a touchy subject, and I'm scared I'm going to say something that can be misconstrued or come across like in the way that I don't intend it. But yeah, it is tough, man. Like I often find anytime I'm involved in a project where we actually care about accessibility, it's just because I'm forcing it. It's because I'm in a position of power and I'm saying that, we're going to do this as a team. You don't have a choice. Otherwise, I'm not going to manage this project. It's tough. And yeah, like that's a podcast on its own.
No, for sure. No, and I mean, it boils down to the fact that you have to get people to truly care. And that is, it's better. Let me be totally honest. Like, I mean, the tooling around it has improved leaps and bounds, and the number of people that talk about it has grown exponentially, which I love. But in the end of the day, what's the important thing is that people who are not evangelists care about this. Like, you understand. And I think one of the new ways that it's being framed that I like is this whole idea of oftentimes when you do something to benefit somebody with some ability challenges, benefits all your users in the end of the day. And I think the more we can pull examples out of the real world to demonstrate that, the more it becomes less of I'm doing it for a small percentage of my audience to I'm doing a thing that's going to benefit a small percentage of my audience, but turns out it's also going to benefit all the other people as well. And I think there's more and more of those examples being highlighted. And that changes the conversation. Because I know for the longest time, the way to talk about it was, well, you can get sued. Have you heard about Target? And I don't know if fear-mongering is the way to get people to care about something. So,
I would say I'd actually say I hold the opposite position. For me, the only real way we're going to get any sort of traction on this is if there is like financial realities of punishment for companies, because I do hear what you're saying, but if I just look at what a tight ship a lot of companies are running, even just sometimes making it a good experience for the average user. The completely able-bodied user, sometimes there's not even enough time to actually do that because other features need to be shipped. And I also have to say, we can hate on companies as much as we want, but there is a big shortage of developers. So that usually means that any team won't ever be able to get to all the work that needs to be done. So most teams have positions that have just been open for years and they haven't filled it and they're just short-staffed. So I do think there is a bit of a kind of companies just having bad incentives, but I also think a lot of it is just skills, and I think, just in terms of and I think specifically in South Africa, I have a theory where in South Africa specifically, I think we're trying to combat a lot of that with FEDSA is that, and I'm as guilty of this as well. I do a lot of international work. Because, South African companies can't really compete with the exchange rate. If I get paid in pounds and dollars, a South African tech company can't really compete. And so that by nature means once people reach a certain level of seniority, they immediately start working with international teams, which is great. But at the end of the day, what then happens is the actual like the actual skills in the actual pool of people that are working on South African products is, greatly diminished. And you don't have those opportunities for mentorship in South African teams and so forth, which I'm of the opinion that the South African, just experience of using South African products on the web and so forth is not at the standard that it should be. Like, I think we as South Africans just assume because, it's Takealot or because it's Showmax or whatever, we can't hold Showmax to the same standard as Netflix. We can't all Takealot to the same standard as Amazon or whatever, And like, I do think, unfortunately, it's a bit self-perpetuating. And I would wish if South Africans were more demanding of kind of the experience that they get from actual tech products in South Africa.
Yeah. Do you think this is a general thing in developing countries where essentially when developers reach this level of seniority, you have this, like they say, brain drain, and so automatically you kind of have this knock-on effect happening, and then because some people are going to get left behind in that story, right? They're never going never going to reach that seniority because the people that can help them get there leave. Yeah,
and and it's interesting. So, I've actually spoken to Philip from Offer Zen, one of the co-founders of Offer Zen, about this quite a lot, because what they're seeing a lot of not only South Africans actually, working for European companies and so forth post-COVID, like as the whole world went more remote. They're also seeing a lot of actual developers from other countries come and work in South Africa just because it's a nice climate. The cost of living is, pretty inexpensive and so forth. And they work with their kind of teams in Silicon Valley or whatever, but they're based in Cape Town. And so, I think where I stand on that, and what I've mentioned to Philip as well, is that I think there's a danger there in not seeing that as a brain drain just because people are still physically here. But what happens is, once again, the actual teams in South Africa, the juniors in South Africa, and, those like working adjacent to developers, maybe in product design or in tech support or whatever, they are getting deprived of a lot of seniority and opportunities for mentoring and so forth. It's tricky. I don't know, but once again, I'm as guilty of this as anyone else. I have to also say that unfortunately also I find that South African tech companies don't treat their employees that well, unfortunately.
That's been my experience as well.
I think specifically as a front-end developer, I often feel that South African companies tend to see front-end development as an afterthought. So
it's not a real job.
Yeah, and it's like you get the designs from the designer and you get the API, or not even the API, let's say you're doing PHP templating or whatever, you just make the CSS fit the design. There's no mention of design systems or any of that stuff, So now you're given the opportunity to be less respected and earn less money just out of principle, So I think at some point, even I'm so I try and, so there's a company called Palmetrics that I do about 50% of my work is for them. So they're kind of like a seller dashboard for sellers, third-party sellers on Takealot. So that is one of the big South African teams that I work with, and it's just because also I share a lot of the there's a lot of overlap in terms of just culture and whatever. So I really enjoy working with the team there. But most of my other work's international, unfortunately.
So I think this ties in nicely with how we've talked about all this stuff and just the thematic thing you said now. So how, as a teacher, because I know that's a large part of what you do, what do you see the role of open source? What role does it play in learning and in teaching?
Sure. Yes. Okay. That's a tough one. I can say for one that it isn't playing nearly as big as a role as it should. I still see so many teams that are effectively trying to create their own worse version of MDN. I've just encountered so many, because I've taught at a lot of places. I've kind of been involved in a lot of programs and so forth, and there's an obsession with creating content. And I think in terms of education, we are still we're kind of in almost like, we're kind of so there's a really great book by the name of Info We Trust. And it talks about, the information age isn't like on the horizon anymore. We're like in the shoulder depth in it. We're like drowning in information. And, and I think indicative of that is just like the fact that, most of the big tech companies and then the most profitable companies is companies that actually help navigate that just sea of information, whether it be Google or Facebook or Twitter or whatever, or even Wikipedia. So, but I do think a lot of educational programs and a lot of people involved in those programs are still in a mind, in a information scarcity mindset, where they think the value that they're providing is giving students content, creating reading material, creating instructional videos and things for you. And I think one thing that we've started exploring at CodeSpace is, I'm obviously going to speak a lot about CodeSpace because that is like where I spend most of my teaching time at the moment. We've started exploring not creating any new content. So playing the role of curating content. So sending people to MDN, giving them a list of YouTube videos to watch and so forth, and thinking about the value we provide a bit differently. I think I draw a lot of inspiration from the Odin project. You're probably familiar with the Odin project. Yeah, so they also tend to take more of a curation role than an actual creating content role. And yeah, does the world really need one more YouTube video on Flexbox?
Probably not.
Probably not. And probably not with the budget that I have. I'll just leave it to actual high producing streamers to do a really engaging video on how Flexbox works. So what is the value that I provide then? And I always start by asking my students, why are you here instead of just doing a 200 Rand Udemy course? And they never even actually think about that. But even worse, why are you here when you could just be doing free code camp? Which most of the time has even better outcomes than a lot of these boot camps. So I think what we've been trying to do is integrate a lot more of those things. So instead, actually having students do free code camp in addition to what we provide. So instead of seeing something like free code camp or Udemy or whatever as a competitor to the training that we provide, seeing how we can maybe play a more curation role in terms of guiding people in terms of, okay, if I want to go into this, what are things worth exploring? If I want to build this type of app, what are the stuff I should be looking at? Because there's also a lot of misinformation out there. What are the things, should I be using MDN or should I be using W3 schools? I've seen so many programs where they actually use W3 schools as an actual reference. I'm like, yeah. Okay. I shouldn't probably have said that part aloud, but yeah, it's pretty well known that I'm not a big fan of W3 schools. But yeah, so I think to answer your question, what role should open source be playing? Sure, I don't know a role at this point. I don't think it's playing that much of a role at the moment. We just have too many people creating content, too many people building LMSs. When something like GitHub actually has a really solid like educational platform that you can use, and you can set it up so it runs automated tests and whatever. Do we really need to be building another Laravel powered like LMS for our specific bootcamp or our specific? Yeah, so I think like there's a bit of a mindset change that needs to happen there in terms of relying more on open source things, relying more on what's out there. And I think there's a bit of fear there insofar that people are scared that that's going to make them redundant. But I also think, I don't know, it may be easy for me to say, but if it makes you redundant, then so be it, like, would you rather try and stay relevant at the expense of students, at the expense of their... So I told my wife yesterday, I just have so many things I can say on this topic. I told my wife yesterday, so like at CodeSpace, for next year, we have an intake of 150 students. And that's the biggest intake we've had ever. And it's so scary. It's like you literally have the ability to mess up 150 people's possible career prospects. That's a conversation for another day. I just find that there's a lot of misidentification of the real value that education provides in the information age. I think especially a lot of like boot camps and stuff try and copy what universities are doing, because I think they're under the impression it's more legit. Universities are quote unquote better than just like some random, but I don't know, like as someone who's done a lot of work for universities, the university model is not what you want to be copying. and saying this as someone who has a master's degree himself and spent 7 years studying, I honestly think like the university model is very flawed in this day and age. And I think we need to do some fundamental rethinking in terms of how we train people. A good friend of mine, Candice, she works for a company called Fourth Rev, so Fourth Industrial Revolution. And so they are exploring a lot of these things in terms of how do you do education in a world like the one we're in today. And honestly, I don't necessarily have any good suggestions. I think I can maybe just say like there's a lot of stuff we're doing really badly, and we should maybe just address them before we actually see how we can improve. Just give an average experience, before we even aim for great. I'd be curious. I'd be curious. Just most people that I speak to that have some type of training in coding or whatever, is pretty dissatisfied with kind of their bootcamp experience. And a lot of them, just in spite of kind of the course that they did or the degree that they got or whatever, actually succeed. So I don't know, it kind of feels like we don't necessarily have to win at this game. At this point, we just need to stop scoring own goals at the very least.
That's a good way of putting it.
At the very least, just stop sabotaging ourselves. Let's just at least stop the bad stuff, and then we can focus on making it better.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think the curation thing you were talking about, I think that is the missing link at the moment. Everybody that I speak to that's new and starting to learn, it's not that there isn't content out there. There's actually too much. And so
exactly.
finding a path through all of that is what they find much, much more challenging than finding content. They don't know what to trust. They don't know if this person is good or not. There's different modalities, different ways people learn. And so I think being in the curation space and doing a really good job at that is, I think, much more important right now than just, like you said, creating another version of MDN or Free Code Camp or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's effectively what you're doing here.
Yes.
So instead of doing like, welcome to the Schalk Neethling stream, and I'm going to be teaching you about what you need to know as a developer, you're kind of relying on what people are doing out there and what people already explored and surfacing that.
Exactly.
Instead of trying to create stuff. Yeah, like, so at the very least, you have that going for you.
Well, that's good to hear. That's good to hear, because that was the intent.
Yeah.
Schalk,
From one Schalk to another.
Yeah, exactly. So this was really great. I think this is a wonderful conversation. It was like far-reaching, and it delved into all kinds of things, which I think was really, really interesting, and people are going to enjoy listening to it. And so in closing, Tim Ferriss has this thing at the end of each show that he always asks people, if you had a billboard in a really, really busy street and you could put a phrase on there for everybody to see, what would that be? So my question is similar in nature, but then the message would be, what would that message be for people that's getting into tech?
Phew. Okay, like that would very much depend on what time of day you ask me, or even like what day of the week you ask me. So I would probably just default to like whatever I tell my students the most. And I think what I always come back to is that it doesn't need to suck this much. Like, I think a lot of them have an expectation that, you know, they're going to have to work through the night. They're going to have to like put in all these hours. They're going to have to like, people are going to have to treat them like crap. And like, honestly, I always tell my students, there are teams out there, there are people out there that are like, I don't want any part of that. Like, if you come and work for us, if you're part of our team, we don't want that. We're gonna like actively push you to take care of yourself. And I find that, you know, with my students, a lot of times there's an expectation that they need to almost like bow down to this hustle culture. And they can't be like, I actually want to take care of myself. I actually want to be in a healthy mental state. I don't want to sacrifice my mental health. And like, yeah, and to me, it's just like I always tell them, like the tech field is just so wide and there's just so many people doing so many different things that you don't need to settle for something that you feel is not aligned with your values. And I think that is one of the benefits that we have within the tech field, is just because at the moment there's such a big demand. So you should be able to find something that resonates with you. Don't just like, especially if you're a junior and you're looking for your first job, don't just settle for the first thing that comes along. There is a lot of teams that treat people with respect, that value you as a human. And there's a lot of companies that are forced to do this just because they need developers so badly, even if they would have treated you like garbage. So I think that's what I always tell my students, is that there's a lot more room out there for you to have a better experience than you maybe think there is.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Thanks so much, Schalk. This was wonderful, as I said. Thank you for spending your Friday afternoon with me. That was really great.
Yeah, now it's back to changing nappies and the dad stuff.
Back to the real world.
Yeah, cool. Thanks so much. This was really great.
Yeah, thanks, Scott.
I hope we can chat again soon.
Oh, for sure.
Cool. Cheers, man.
Thank you for listening to the Mycelium Network podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with your friends. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Have something to add? Continue the conversation on GitHub and join the community on Slack. Until the next one, keep making the web awesome.